Conservatives now reversing one of the only measures for gun safety that was actually passed in the recent era. And again, you can put all politics to the side as a measure of how extreme the Supreme Court is today with this ruling. I'm going to tell you this was one of the things that got through the broken, hyper-partisan Washington that we hear so much about, that even had centrist and moderate and Republican support to try to deal with one part of our gun crisis in America. Today, the court reversed a ban on something that are called bump stocks, and the opinion was 6-3, meaning the conservatives and all three Trump justices are making it easier to get deadly weapons. In America, the other three justices from Democratic appointees dissented. Now, all you need to really know about the bump stock thing is it takes weapons and makes them deadlier. It basically makes a faster semi-automatic with a higher rate of fire. In fact, you can go hundreds of rounds a minute, which, from a legal perspective, goes well beyond what most people would ever need for self-defense, right? You don't need to shoot off 100 or 200 rounds a minute to stop one or two people that might be legally justified in you shooting at them to defend yourself, but not 200. That's more like war. Now, you may recall that we all heard a lot more about this in America after something terrible happened in Las Vegas. The October 2017 mass shooting there is actually still the deadliest such mass shooting in American history ever. Now, I'm not trying to make this too dark. We're not going to just show terrible images or anything too extreme. These images are just of the general situation and some people who actually were alive. But I will tell you, for your knowledge, 58 people were killed that day, and over 800, let me repeat that, over 800 were injured. There are many mass shootings, so this one may have blurred with others in your memory, but this was the worst ever. And the shooter had brought 12 rifles that were all basically supersized into far deadlier weapons with these bump stocks that I'm mentioning. The shooter was able to fire off more than 1,000 rounds of ammo. That is a wartime level. It was so extreme and so deadly that it actually jarred the Republican Party, which, as you've heard, usually says after any shooting, it's not a time to act, it's too soon, just grieve. But in response, even with the Republican president, then President Trump, they decided to make a measured move. And again, I'm just telling you legally, policy-wise, how this worked. It wasn't some sweeping restriction on confiscating guns, taking back people's guns, anything like that. They banned just this device that makes these guns deadlier. And they did it through executive action. As you probably know, it's hard to get anything through the Congress, and it's especially hard to get gun legislation through. But Donald Trump did something that really overlapped, and I would say it's one of the only gun or domestic safety measures he did that overlapped with what President Obama had talked about, which is sometimes using the powers of the presidency, executive action, rather than going through Congress. And there are many ways to do that, as you may recall, that are generally lawful if you're building on, for example, agencies or regulations that already exist under law. The Congress, of course, has been much slower or generally blocked or had Senate filibusters, not allowing majority votes on this. I mentioned President Obama, who also ran into those congressional roadblocks after the terrible massacre of Sandy Hook.
The majority of those who died today were children. Beautiful little kids between the ages of 5 and 10 years old. We're going to have to come together and take meaningful action to prevent more tragedies like this, regardless of the politics.
That's definitely true regardless of the politics, because if you define politics as what the whole country generally wants, well, most people want more gun safety regulation, especially if it doesn't involve, as I mentioned, the more far-reaching measures like confiscating guns. But if you talk about limiting the semi-automatics or having background checks or doing these kind of basic things, widespread support. Obama was referring to the politics of Congress, where the NRA has a kind of a stranglehold and has been able to block legislation. So Obama later said the failure to even get the universal background checks, which again doesn't take anyone's guns, but just make sure that criminals or people who are very dangerous or mentally unstable are vetted and aren't able to just get really deadly weapons. He said of everything that happened in his 2 terms, the fact that even after Sandy Hook they couldn't get those background checks through was his, quote, biggest disappointment. Those roadblocks stalled legislation, and that's key to what I'm telling you about today. Mass shootings, of course, have spanned all of our recent history. This is one of the great crises in the United States. It's a problem that is partially of our making because other places with similar populations and systems have found ways to reduce gun violence without giving up all liberty. Like I said, universal background checks, restricting certain types of ammunition, certain enhancements of guns. These are all things you can do while letting people who have regular self-defense handguns or rifles for hunting, they can keep them. And it's a personal issue, as I mentioned, because even President Trump, who was generally cozier with the NRA, he took this action, which the Supreme Court overruled today. President Obama, who was seen as kind of a moderate, didn't push, for example, for sweeping gun confiscation, said he couldn't get the background check done. And in a lot of places, red, blue, purple, whatever, people have lived through this and are pretty open to the idea that we can do something more to protect ourselves. Look at former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Warren Burger. He was a Nixon appointee, as you see there. And after he retired, he spoke out quite clearly about the difference between what the Constitution historically has meant about guns and how it has been perverted.
The Second Amendment,
which says
that a well-regulated militia being necessary for the defense of the state, the people's rights to bear arms. This has been the subject of one of the greatest pieces of fraud, I repeat the word fraud, on the American public by special interest groups that I have ever seen in my lifetime.
And what a lifetime it was. That Nixon appointee Republican saying, quote, I repeat the word fraud. He was talking, of course, about the special interest group, the NRA. Other people in the Republican Party who, again, support hunting and self-defense and law and order and police and all that type of stuff that we hear about would also say that there is a reasonable or moderate conservative way to also protect the innocent with reasonable gun safety measures.
I believe in background checks at gun shows or anywhere to make sure that guns don't get in the hands of people that shouldn't have them.
We want to do everything we can to prevent guns from falling into the hands of people who are mentally unbalanced or criminals.
I did think we ought to extend the assault weapons ban.
I do believe that an AK-47, a machine gun, is not a sporting weapon or needed for defense of the home.
Reagan with the applause and all. Those are Republican Party leaders. I could show you many centrists, independents, of course, Democrats and liberals who are known to even lead for this and more strict gun safety measures. The problem with gun violence is worse here. One study found that firearm homicide rates are not double, triple, or quadruple. And by the way, quadruple means 4 times as many deaths, right? Just to be clear about what I'm telling you, but 19 times greater than in France. A whopping 77 times greater than in Germany. And if you do comparative policy, which is what the Congress and other policymakers are supposed to do, to look at different options and make decisions, if you look at that, you can see, come back. You can just see, if you look around the world, at the spectrum. And so someone might say, well, that German example, where it's 70 times safer, but there's a lot more restrictions on gun rights and liberty and even hunting. Someone might say, well, the U.S. doesn't want to go that far. Okay. That's a fair, valid debate. If you watch this program, you know we try to deal with facts and policy and law, not hyperbole. So maybe you don't want to go all the way here. But you could be here in the middle, or you could be here, or you could even be here. And instead, I want to be very clear, the Supreme Court's pulling all the way off the map. Justice Thomas, writing today, in this ruling, says they conclude that semi-automatic rifles equipped with what I mentioned, the bump stock, are not a technical machine gun because it doesn't fire more than one shot by a, quote, single function of the trigger. If that sounds like something different than traditional constitutional law, that's because it is. He's doing semantic backflips about gun descriptions. It's words on top of words, and Justice Thomas was parsing a law that is almost a century old from 1934. It went on like this, but because this ruling isn't really about the words, I'm not going to read too many of them to you. In the dissent, Justice Sotomayor said, when I see a bird that walks like a duck and swims like a duck and quacks like a duck, I call that bird a duck. A bump stock equipped with semi-automatic rifle fires automatically more than one shot. She explained it fires with more than one shot without manual reloading by a single function of the trigger. And so she said, because I, like Congress, call that a machine gun, I respectfully dissent. Again, if it sounded like a lot of word salad, that's what court debates can be like, but you have the Republican appointees who seemed like they basically wanted to even take the most moderate, mild, small gun safety rule that came out of Donald Trump's White House and knock that down. It seemed like they had that plan before they even went in and started writing about what a machine gun means in their own mind. The conservative majority has done this. We've covered how the corruption here gives you a window into what they really think. Some of them, at least. Justice Alito's wife flying the flag in solidarity with insurrectionists. Justice Thomas pocketing millions of dollars from a controversial Republican billionaire who has a copy of Hitler's Mein Kampf signed on display in his home. Now, these people want you to believe that what they did over the last couple weeks, or however long they worked on this case, was parse the meaning of the word machine gun and go back and study this 1934 law. And the problem is, and this is a problem that's larger than this ruling today. I went to law school where a lot of time is spent respectfully, almost reverentially, looking at what the court writes as if it's true. But the larger problem is a lot of this stuff doesn't sound very credible because it's not. And think about this. Justice Thomas would have you believe that he spent all this time carefully parsing what the law from 1934 said, not with his own agenda to help the NRA or the gun groups or even the donors he consorts with, but with an open mind, because all he did was parse those words. But then you have to remember, on something that hits much closer to home, the ethics code that requires certain recusals and suggests that judges avoid the appearance of a conflict of interest, that operates right now. It ain't from 1934. Justice Roberts brought it out this year after Alito and Thomas's scandals. Well, Justice Thomas doesn't parse that at all. He doesn't even pretend to read it or look at it or explain to us why he's defying it. He just flouts it. So yes, it may be time to put away the reverence and the deference and understand that this crisis is part of the other crises we have in America.